Good afternoon.
Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon. Oops, let me just change my background. All right. So yeah, let's wait for a minute or two. Let me just what do you call this? Prepare my deck. Yes. Wait, I can't seem to. What happened to my PowerPoint? Okay. Let me just retrieve my deck. Wait. Um, Insert pointer. Okay, I will share my screen. Sige, we'll start now. No? It's 5:02. Sige, the others can just follow. Thank you again for joining. No? Again, as I mentioned last time, no, I really appreciate that, especially most of you here no, are the regular folks that attend my class. No? So I know that things are busy now. Um, of course, core courses like SOCs are competing with your majors. So, sige, that's fine. I don't take offense. But again, in some ways, no, sometimes in my synchronous classes, I provide some additional materials, no, additional input. So I hope the others are trying to catch the video recording. If not, it's their loss. Anyway, all right. Sige, sorry, no, it's only part 3, no? Not part 3 and 4. I was initially thinking if I should include part 4. Pero sige, we'll save that until after Holy Week, no? To just pace it some more, no? Okay, so a few announcements again, just posting the suggested pace. Cover module 4 from until April 30. Of course, it's gonna be your break next week, no? Which is great, no? Take some time to reflect, no? To of course to relax. But if you have time and then you can also think of reconnecting with your faith. Would be a good time. It's Holy Week, or in some cases, reconnecting with your family or friends, or just going out also. So it's up to you. Yeah, you deserve a break, but of course, feel free to study if you also want. But no one's forcing you. Module 4 is the last 2 weeks of the class. Very, very short, actually. So no synchronous class, obviously, next week because it's Holy Week and we're having our academic break next week. Now I have a question to all of you. No, I was thinking of doing a poll. No, but since there are 10 of you, roughly half or a third of the class, siguro I can ask you na lang. No? Kasi the deadline for homework 2 is May 3. No? So what I've done starting last semester is I devote one class. Kaya naman eh. I devote one class and I convert that. It's no longer a lecture. No, I convert that class into I break it up into different time slots. No, and just do pure consultations for homework 2. But my question is, since the deadline is May 7, I was initially thinking of doing April 26 as the consultation day. The problem is some of you might not even be ready to do a consultation kasi you might be, lahat naman tayo, we've crammed at certain points in our lives. So some of you may not even have resources ready or have an outline ready by April 26. So my question to you all, no, and I think there's a poll, no? Ayun, may poll pala dito. I can do a poll. Okay. For those of you who are here, would you rather, of course, again, okay. Okay, wait. Let me just poll. Okay, next. Okay, let me do this now. So either April 26, what's your preference? So that, I can anonymize this now. What's your preference for consultation, for homework 2 consultation? So choice 1 would be April 26. Choice 2 would be May 3. But May 3 is 4 days away from the deadline. But uh, you still have 4 days after. So I will save this. This is my first time to do this. Did you guys see anything? Did anything happen? Sorry, I'm not familiar.
None, sir.
How do we do this? Activated. Okay, so how do I do this? Wait. I think I can share this. Allow participants, save. Okay, wait lang ha. Sorry. Okay. So nothing's happening, no? Sorry. Ganun na lang. No? I mean, don't be shy. Ganun na lang. Please just type your preference in the chat box, please. Or you can send me private messages if you want, if you're shy. But wala namang problema. No? Ayaw gumana. So let's just do it via chat. Okay? If you can tell me what your preference will be, via chat na lang sa Zoom. No? May 3 or April 26 as the consultation day. I'm gonna allot around 20 minutes for each group, no, to consult with me for homework. Of course, it's optional, pero what would be your preference? Sa chat box na lang, please. Ay, ito pala. Sorry. I can launch it. Pala. There you go. Are you seeing something now? Yes, I think you can.
Yes, sir.
All right. Sagutin nyo na lang. All right. All right. So the majority, actually most, no, prefer May 3. So okay. So we'll still have class on April 26. I think that will be, I'll start covering module 5, no, the last module, no, for April 26. So for the benefit of, let me just do this. Wait, let me just change the slide para if your classmates are accessing, because I'll share the deck anyway. No? So class period on May 3. Okay, I've already created the Google Doc sheet. No, sorry, Google Doc document. So I'll just share that with you. Okay, so I'll share it again. Thank you for that. Thank you for your patience. It's my first time to do a poll. So class period on May 3 will be devoted to optional again. So I'll send this by tonight or tomorrow. No? I'll send the link so you can start signing up for your group. Again, it's optional. If you really think, ay, sayang lang oras namin, then it's a free day for you. okay lang. But I think it's a lot of students found it useful kasi sometimes they say, sir, kulang pa kami ng date ng research. Anong sources pa ba ang pwede? Or sir, tama ba yung focus namin on this? So you can consult with me. I won't necessarily tell you what to write, no, but I can ask you questions so that you can be pointed to the right direction. Okay. And additional references, ito, a good resource. This is run by AmCham, no, the American Chamber of Commerce. It's a good resource. No? So you go to investphilippines.info/Arangkada. This one. No? So that takes you to their page. No? And there's a search function. You can search, for example, create bill or rice tarification or whatnot, no? Or PPP law, etc., etc. It might be useful, no? But of course, consult other resources because what AmCham does is they actually compile, different press releases, articles, news clips, etc., etc. So it's a good resource. Parang they curate things. And speaking of curating things, if you are really interested, no, and you can sign up, anyone can sign up, no. They have a daily news clippings service. So what they do is every day, one of their staff, no, they it's mostly focused on business and economic news, but of course politics affects business. That's why there's a lot of political articles as well. So they do news clippings every day. They send out a daily selection by around midday or early afternoon, or sometimes even late morning. No? So you can subscribe. Anyone can subscribe, so you get that every day for really good curated news, no? Business and economic news for the most part. So Business World, Business Mirror, mga Philstar, no, the business sections there, some good headlines, etc., etc. So feel free to subscribe. Ano naman yan? Anyone. It's free too. So it's a good service. Especially if you're like, how can I have have the best resources, no? The best articles to read. So it's a good selection. Maganda yung pagkahakil. All right. Any questions first? Some administrative questions on anything before we jump into the third part of Module 4. Wala naman. All right. But you can email me as well if you have questions. Okay. Population and demography. Then this will be quick now. We might even be finished by 6 or just a little past 6. So we'll see. We'll see. Kasi again nga, as I told you guys, no, agrarian reform, that was the longest. Public finance, it's a bit shorter, still long. Ito medyo short na talaga. And then the last part, no, the role of private sector, that's the shortest one here. So I was initially thinking, pagsama ko ba, but I decided against it. Para tamang pacing lang. All right, population and demography. For those of you who have covered population and demography, can you tell the class about Malthusian theory? What have you learned on Canvas? What's Malthus? Who was Malthus? What was his famous theory? Enzo.
If I remember correctly, Malthus thought that population growth is exponential, but food growth would be linear. So food growth wouldn't be able to match population growth. But then he was proven wrong because of the improvements in food technology.
All right. Thank you for saying what I wanted to say in the next slide. Thank you very much. So yeah, Malthus was thinking that population, he was a doomsayer, no? He was a fearmonger. Sabi, oy, grabe, no? The population is going by leaps and bounds. No? Maybe there will come a point, kasi ito nga, there will come a point that, the production of food will not be able to keep up with the population, the growing population. So Malthus was largely debunked because of technological process. Kasi right now, if you compare the yields, of agriculture and food production, compared to before, no? Ibang-iba, no? Because of science. No? Now they have precision agriculture, better yielding seeds, etc., etc. And the population, I mean, globally, no, in most countries, even developing countries, it has actually slowed down. So, actually baliktad, no. So actually, it's not necessarily the absolute number of people there are in a country or in the world. It's really more about there's enough food for everyone. I mean, imagine you go to a buffet. Yan pa lang, that's a good indication that there is food available. It's just a matter of access, distribution, etc. The things we talked about last time when we talked about food security. No? Some people can't afford it. So it's a problem with distribution and fairness rather than supply because food is there. Kaya nga puro unli ka, you go, especially now that we're now sort of exiting the pandemic. Kita mo, ako kasi I subscribe to promos. Yellow Cab, Eat All You Can, Max, whatnot, no? Lahat, mga unli Korean barbecue, they're back again. So there's enough food to feed everyone or even twice the amount of people, but it's not that though. So that's been largely debunked. So the issue with population studies, no, demography lang naman is a sort of a fancy term for population studies, no? Study of population trends and statistics. That's demography for you. All right. So just to recap, no, and some of these are actually all of these are on your Canvas course already. No? We're now more than 111 million. No? So I like the Popcom website, no? Kasi if you go there, they sort of parang in real time they add to the number of people in the Philippines. Of course, based on projections, you know. Hindi siya linked to, let's say, the hospitals and then every birth it appears there. No? It's not that. Before, we were really growing rapidly, but now at least growth rate has gone down a bit. No? And I have a slide later, no, to examine what actually happened during the pandemic. Ito kasi pre-pandemic to, no? Yung 1.7%. But during the pandemic, it has further slowed down. And as you would expect, no, of course, the regions with the largest populations are NCR and the surrounding regions. Sabi nga nila, NCR has different daytime and nighttime population. Kasi some people working in Metro Manila, they actually live outside. No? So for example, kasi kami, US Embassy kami, na USAID. So we are in Ross Boulevard. I have a lot of colleagues, they live in either Antipolo, Rizal, or they live in Cavite, or some live in Laguna. So in daytime, they're here. No? So sabi nga nila, mga 20 million tayo daytime NCR. No? Nighttime, around 15, 16 million. That's big, no? Plus the surrounding areas. And, and that's highly correlated with economic productivity. No? The three regions that account for 2/3, no, collectively of GDP are found here. NCR, Region 3, and Region 4A. We've crossed the threshold in terms of urban populations. No? Now more than 50% of Filipinos are residing in urban areas. No? And it's a young population. No? You see this, no? Kasi some countries, no, like Japan, for example, baliktad, no? The bulge is at the top. No? They have an aging population. Tayo, we have we have a young population, and roughly a third are below 15. More than 60% are working age. So some of these statistics would be relevant when we talk about the demographic dividend and the sweet spot that they keep on talking about. So they do the census to count, just to count people. No? They do the census, the actual, no? Number of people. They do a census of population and housing. By law, it's supposed to be done every 10 years. No? But in practice, they've actually done it every 5 years. Kumbaga, ang minimum is every 10 years. No? It's actually a census of population and housing. So some of the characteristics, mind you, no, that you see in APIS, like the materials of the houses, the tenure of the houses, some of them are also asked when they do the census of population and housing. So may mga similar indicators. And as we have discussed, no, census is different because they administer the questionnaire to all households. No? Yung mga FIES kasi APIS, that's a survey. So sample lang yan. Hindi yan. Ito, this is like comprehensive. So it costs money. So every 5 years, no? The last time they did it was 2020, actually during the pandemic. No? Na late ng konti. But they're still finalizing the analysis of some of the data there. All right. There's this thing called, if you watch the video there, there's this thing that economists and some people very optimistically are saying, oh, there's this demographic dividend. The Philippines is now experiencing this, or we are at the cusp of yielding a demographic dividend. What is that all about? Anyone know? Especially the RH group, for example. You've probably heard this term. If you haven't studied it in Canvas yet, what do you think it is? Or if you want to take a wild guess. Anyone? Wala muna. Sige, okay lang. All right. So, formally defined in a sense, it's basically the additional economic growth, or economic prosperity that results from a change in a country's population structure. So what that means is, in theory, ako kasi I always there's a lot of caveats to this, and I will in a sense sort of dispute this. Kasi in theory, demographic dividend, kasi parang that in simple terms, what happens is, ito na lang. So step by step tayo just to try to explain it better. I think my Canvas course does a better job. Pero let me try lang to articulate it clearly and simply. So what happens is, sinasabi nila, demographic dividend happens when two things happen. Una, mortality goes down. Ibig sabihin, more people can actually be working. Diba? That's one. Fertility rates go down. Less people getting pregnant, less people, less people getting pregnant, less people being born. Less people in general being produced or added. What that means is the key concept here is all about dependency. For the remaining slides, what you have to remember when we're talking about demography is the dependency. It's all about dependency. Kasi what happens is, okay, less people being born. So the couples, what happens? So the couples now have more disposable income. Diba? So you have a workforce now. Tingnan nyo nga, diba? So our population structure is more than 60% working age. So they themselves, the working age population, plus those people who are no longer dying, they are earning money and they are spending money. So that in itself creates more wealth, more prosperity, adds to economic growth. And the other dimension there is they have less dependence. Dati kasi your parents, my parents, they were six silang siblings, or my wife, yung family ng mother-in-law ko, there were 10 of them, Dati the dependency was high, I'm a couple, I have more mouths to feed before. So I don't have a lot of disposable income. Now, I have less mouths to feed, therefore, and I'm working, I'm productive, so I have more disposable income, so I can keep on buying more. Not just the basic stuff, not just basic necessities, but I can devote more of my salary to, let's say, luxury goods. Kasi isa na lang yung anak namin or dalawa rather than 5. Because the fertility rates have gone down. And then you have a large workforce. So the large workforce less dependence, that's a boon. Not just for government services, no? It's a boon for shops. Remember, GDP is composed of consumption, investment, no? Plus government. No? Even for government, no? Government doesn't have to keep um, increasing the budget just to provide for more Filipinos. Diba? So it's a boon for couples. They have more disposable income. No? It's also good for government because they can save more, less people to administer to care for, etc. etc. And government, no, hindi na sila kailangan magbigay ng, let's say, ayuda if couples are not having a hard time kasi nga they're working and then there are less dependents. So bottom line, less dependence, large working class, large working population, we have a lot of economic prosperity happening kasi nga they have higher disposable incomes. Yun. But that is in theory. My argument there, no, because many people are saying, sige, okay yan. Dami na nating workers, no? Sakto, tapos less people being born. But the problem is, my counter argument there is, in theory, yes, but the problem is, what is the quality of the workers? Because for me, no, maximizing the dividend requires that the bulk of the population who are actually working age already, no, are productive. The problem is, again, it goes back to our lesson on human capital. Ang problema, if you're not productive, if let's say you're not employed, if natapos mo lang high school or less than high school or even grade school lang or less, then do you actually really contribute to the economy? Are you really earning enough money regardless of how many dependents you have? Maybe not. So maybe mas muted yun. So the problem is we have a lot of youth that are unemployed. It's 2 times the national unemployment rate, no? And the problem is, even for the long term, no, 22% of the youth were not employed or were not even going to school or not even TESDA, no, yung vocational training, which translates to 4.4 million. No? So the problem is, if they are not productive currently and in the future, no, regardless if they are workforce, if they are part of the workforce, theoretically speaking, and regardless if they are marrying late, having kids late, and having fewer kids, no, they themselves can also be a burden. Kasi dependency rate effectively goes up if working age people are not productive. Diba? Para ka na ring another mouth to feed. If you yourself, even though you are supposed to be contributing to the economy, if you yourself are not able, you don't have good human capital, you cannot expect that group, no, to be providing additional economic benefits to the country. So yun yung problema. In theory, yun nga less mouths to feed, mas makakatipid ng government, makakatipid din yung couples, no? They're both working, they can spend more. But the problem is if couples are just earning the bare minimum, no? And they don't have more income, more disposable income, even if they have less mouths to feed, they're not as productive and they can contribute more. So for me, the demographic dividend is reaped when, yes, when the country's population structure changes, you have more workers, but the workers actually have higher human capital and they can contribute more to the economy. Pero kung hindi naman sila employed or not productive or not training, then you won't reap good dividends. So that's the thing. So throughout the discussion of demography, of population studies, dependency is a key thing. The problem is if you're not productive, you may also be tantamount to being a dependent. Diba? Kasi wala kang kita masyado, di burden ka din. So it's basically the minimizing burden and dependence. I'll keep emphasizing this point. So again, as I told you, on the macro side, it's not really it's not really the total number of Filipinos that's the problem. It's actually who, for the most part, it's actually who has the most number of family members or kids. No? Ito kita nyo. No? Ironically, those who have fewer resources have larger family sizes. So there is greater dependency burden. So kita nyo to, this was done by, I think, si Toots Albert, no? Si Jose Ramon Albert. Nickname niya Toots kasi. You see, no, they divided the population into income classes. So poor then up all the way to the rich families. So among the poor, the average family size, no, so parents and kids, no, 6. Those who can afford it had 3. Layo, di ba? So again, those who have fewer. So ito, and again, just brings home the point that dependency ratio is important kasi ito lang naman, it's the ratio of parents to their dependents. Sorry, ang dependency ratio na naman is the numerator is the working class. It's the, what do you call this? Yeah, it's the working class. Ang ratio is the working class to the number of dependents they have. So the poor, no, over. Their dependents are grabe, di ba? You go to the, so this is just a ratio representation of this one. The poor have more mouths to feed, unfortunately, than the rich ones. Those who can afford opt not to. Diba? Usually na gano'n naman yun. And you'll see here also, no? So, similar thing. No? The good thing is, fertility rates, no? Fertility lang naman is the amount of offspring a woman produces. No? So here there's another point. No? But here, education kasi, as you probably noticed, no? It's correlated with wealth, no? With income status. No? So usually the less the poorer you are, no, the less educational attainment, the lower the educational attainment you'll have. So here's the same thing, no? In terms of dito muna tayo sa column na to. In terms of fertility rate, no, number of children that's of offspring produced, no. So it becomes lower, no, the more that a person is educated, fertility is lower. Parang it kind of correlates with this. Kasi nga, education attainment is highly correlated with income generation, your income class. So ito ganun. This one mirrors this one. Diba? The poorer you are, the more kids you produce or have. But I'm sharing this slide and this table because there's another point I wanted to discuss. It's the actual versus desired fertility. So one of the things, and I'll go back to this now when we talk about the government's thrusts, no, or objectives. No. The Philippines kasi parang ano ba? Do we the question before kasi, do we behave like China? Do we copy China? One-child policy? Do we require or mandate the number of kids, the maximum number of kids? When they were analyzing the data, parang, actually hindi pala. Actually, we want to be closer to the wanted fertility. Kasi there's an actual, diba? Kasi if you will ask, let's say, a family, no, ilang kids ba gusto ninyo? Siguro 2 lang or 3. Versus the actual where instead of 3, we had 5. So that's actual. So what researchers have found that actually there's a big gap sometimes, no, between what families desire than what they actually produce, no, or the number of offspring that they produce. So ito, for example lang, dito na lang tayo, wag na sa education attainment. So imagine nyo, no, yes, the poor still desire larger family sizes, larger number of kids. Hindi na to total number of family members, kids lang to, offspring. So they still desire mga 3. 3.3 on average, no? Kids, no, but it goes slower as you go up the income classes. Pero you realize, no, if for example they were able on average achieve their desired family size of 3 versus 5, no, then their dependency ratio would be lower and less mouths to feed. I have a 3-year-old, no? So I know, no, of course I'm earning decent money naman, but yun pa lang mabigat na. I can't imagine 3 kids or 4 kids or not even 5 kids these days. So imagine if the poorest income class, they were able on average to actually meet their desired fertility or their desired family size, no? Instead of having 5 kids, 3 kids lang, then all the more that you would probably, from a micro perspective, you could have lifted them out of poverty, or from a macro perspective, less dependence. Kasi kanino pa magde-depend yung another poor mouth to feed? Sa government. Then that becomes a dependency burden to the country as a whole. So they realize, no, ganito na lang. So the strategy, and even if you read the RH law, no, and the government's plans, no, it's really all about this. No? It's not to control the number of kids a family can have. It's really trying to close the gap. Move closer to what they desire. The number of kids they desire. Kasi ito, malaki yung difference. Dito kasi, more or less, because the rich couples have, they're educated for the most part, no? So they know the modern family planning methods, no? They can afford them, pwede sa drugstore, hindi na kailangan pumunta sa barangay, no? But the poorer ones, no, they're having a hard time meeting their desired family size. So one important lesson in terms of RH is not control, but just try to help families meet their desired family sizes. Sa poorer ones talaga, in most cases, parang, especially sa rural poor, no, they found that, no, especially among the rural poor, no, their desired family sizes are really bigger, no. In the rural areas kasi, for the most part, sometimes they see their kids as part of the, support system for the farms. Sa urban, siguro gusto pa rin nila, no? So again, paglaki, additional help in the household as well. So it's kind of similar na sa highest income. So that's so again, it all boils down to dependencies. Unfortunately, it's really the poor who are not able to feed more mouths who actually end up producing more offspring. And they have a wide cap. So kung kaya mo lang to minimize or reach that desired fertility size, things will be better. On the macro side, rapid population growth impedes economic growth. Again, so from a macro perspective, especially if it's the poor families that keep adding, no, all the more that the country, the country citizens will be more dependent on government. So ito lang, for example, no, kasi alam niyo naman, if you remember your basic economics, there's that production possibility frontier, no. There's always trade-offs, no, butter or guns. You remember that, siguro basic economics, no? Same thing yan, no? If government, for example, no, keeps on subsidizing the poor and the poor keep having more offspring, no, it creates more dependency in the system, no, and you have to have trade-offs. So government, instead of being able to spend more for, let's say, infrastructure, I need to spend more for 4Ps kasi dumadami pa yung 4Ps. So it impedes economic growth on the one hand kasi nga the government is forced to choose. Diba? Kasi of course, okay pa naman yung debt natin, manageable, but you just don't want to borrow continuously, no? Palaki ng palaki. So it puts pressure on things, no? Social services, dependency on government, no? And of course, the poor cannot be more productive kasi more mouths to feed. Then they can't send all of their kids to school. Then it becomes a vicious cycle, no? They become unproductive and repeat. Employment then, no? The more the more the country produces offspring, especially if they're not well educated and well nourished, then it becomes a drag in the economy or in the country as a whole. And of course, food security. No? Malthus was not right. No? Pero again, more mouths to feed, especially if they're not able to afford for the most part for themselves, no? It threatens food security on the micro and macro levels. And this is no, at least before the pandemic, no, there was this big issue. No? It's a phenomenon. It's a problematic phenomenon because we'll probably see the effects of this in the next few years. No? Um, hindi lang poor, no? And actually, I think for the most part, many of the urban and rural poor communities are facing this phenomenon. No? So ito, there was a news article. It was shocking, no? In 2020, no, before the pandemic, no, 40 to 50 Filipinos aged 10 to 14, not even 14 to 18. So imagine, no, the number would be higher if you count 10 to, imagine 10 years old. No? Totoy pa or nene pa. Giving birth every week. Diba? Grabe. So that's the problem with this, no? What's the problem here? Can anyone tell me? What's the problem with the teenagers giving birth? Going back to our emphasis on dependency. What do you think is the problem there? Anyone? Teenagers giving birth. What's the problem there? Okay lang ba? I mean, set aside morality for now. But what is the problem with this one? Does anyone see a problem? Exactly. Teenagers usually cannot support children themselves. So again, it further worsens the dependency. That's the thing. So imagine nyo nga, di ba, parang, especially the poor, no? Imagine nyo, no? The poor already have, let's say, ito, 6 kids, or ito, their dependents are, their dependency burden is much higher. No? And then you further add a dependent to your dependent. Diba? So because if it's 10 to 14 years old, legally, no, they cannot work muna. No? And even if it's 14 to 18 years old, no, the dependents will have dependents. So for that family unit, no, you will add another dependent. So mas mahirap, di ba? So you further and then kung mahirap yung family, then you become dependent again on government. So again, slippery slope is a vicious cycle. So this is part of your discussion board. I think, no? Yes, some teenage pregnancy. What can you do, no? Or what can you say about it? So before I talk about, so those are sort of statistics in the past, no? And they're pretty relevant. No? Of course, during the pandemic, no, the last 2 years, no, it was a bit extraordinary, out of the ordinary. So you'd expect the indicators, statistics to be quite weird. No? They're not. They're not. They don't follow the usual pattern. So in terms of population trends, no, what do you guys think happened during COVID-19? What do you guys think? What happened during COVID-19 in terms of population trends? What do you think? If you haven't covered it on Canvas, what do you think? What happened during COVID-19? Thoughts lang. You don't have to refer to Canvas. What do you think? What probably happened in the last 2 years? 2020, 2021. What do you think? What happened to population trends? No idea? Rise in teenage unplanned pregnancies. What else? Any other ideas? We'll see if that actually happened. Anyone else? Any ideas? Any guesses? High mortality rates. I think rise also. Rise in what? Pregnancies, no? Teenage pregnancies. All right. Interestingly, okay, Oppo. All right. Actually, no. Um, it was the slowest population rise in 75 years. Noong 2021, 0.3% growth. Diba we were averaging 1 point, when the last time they took census, the census mga 1.6%. So slowest population increase. 2 million less than originally forecasted. Kasi yun na nga, each time they do a census, they now adjust their, they have ano kasi, parang low assumption, medium assumption, high assumption. So may mga forecast sila. It was 2 million less than originally forecasted yung medium. So yung 2021 population at the end of 2021, it was 2 million less than what they initially predicted before the pandemic. Why? There were, tama yung the one who said higher mortality rates. Yes, there were excess deaths. No? Kasi di ba, population it can change, no? Whether there's a change in the number of deaths or births. Births and deaths lang naman, di ba? So, and both, no? If both are moving, if both are moving up or down, no? For example, if deaths are moving up and then births are moving down, then all the more that population will decrease. And that happened during the pandemic. Excess deaths, third leading cause. No? They actually recorded, and this was a bit, maybe it's a bit of a surprise to many. No? There were less births. No? I mean, we're all adults here. No? They were saying, many people engage in more sexual activities down, especially couples during the pandemic. But most likely, they were probably practicing family planning, no? Because apparently, because even if they had more engaged in more sexual activities, then maybe they were using contraceptives, etc. No? And for the most part, marriages were postponed. There were couples, a lot of couples were facing well-being challenges, so parang hindi makafocus, no? Yeah, no? So you think na hindi, nasa bahay lang ganun. No, actually no. It did not translate to that. And the good thing here is there was a reduction instead of an increase, no, in teenage pregnancies. Nagkaroon ng drop. Well, for the most part, di ba, if you think about it, and for the most part, it was enforced, no? People under 18, no, you were prevented from leaving the house for the most part in the first few months or first year of the pandemic. So less mobility. But yun nga, no, since we're now removing restrictions left and right, then you might expect this to start, we might see upticks again in 2022. Unfortunately, including adolescent pregnancies. So yun nga, baka mamaya, no, there's this thing called revenge eating, revenge traveling. There might be revenge in this area as well. Diba? As adolescents. Who knows? We'll see. So at the very least, no, Meg, go ahead.
Sir, if I may ask lang po, since these happened during the pandemic and they were very unprecedented, when we conduct studies in regarding populations or demographics, should these figures be considered outliers or not?
Exactly. So you used a better term than me. No? I was saying kanina, out of the ordinary. They are outliers. So even, for example, it's funny, no? People are saying yung GDP natin is blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of indicators actually are outliers. Even our debt levels are outliers. No? A lot of indicators, including population, they're not the ordinary ones. No? So, yun nga, so when you do studies, parang may caveat, no? Parang may asterisk, no? Kasi this happened during the pandemic. So this isn't because there's a general trend of no, usually they find that the more when a country develops even more, no, there's a tendency that population growth rates go down, but not dramatic. So it's aligned with the overall trend, pero it's an outlier in the sense of the gravity of the decline. So you're absolutely right. I would call it an outlier. And not just population trends, no, but many things like GDP for that matter, debt levels. No. Ito, deaths, no, excess death. COVID was the third leading cause. So if not for COVID, you would expect, lower deaths, lower number of deaths. So yun, you're absolutely correct. So kaya, no, for example, ito lang for the RH group. I don't know, Meg, if you're part of that group or you were probably thinking of that, you cannot attribute the success, quote unquote, the super dramatic reduction of the population to the RH law. No, you cannot. Hindi yun part of that kasi para outlier talaga siya. It was because of the pandemic. Okay. So we're about to end actually. I told you guys it's going to be a short session lang. Yeah, we'll take it easy. It's Holy Week next week. We'll reserve the last part of module 4 next week after Holy Week. Just wanted to present to you what Popcom did, no, at the start of the administration, and it's still valid up to now. No? So again, see here, no, there are three main pillars here, no. These three boxes here, no? The objectives, no. Again, it harks back. So they, each government agency, they try to align themselves with the PDP. So same, di ba, yung maginhawa, matatag, planado. So nilagyan na planado para the population angle. So it's still, again, it's not controlling the population, but we will have a more manageable, better managed population growth, no, if we help families achieve their desired number of kids. So yun, that's number one. And if you can, no, try to prevent unintended pregnancies, no, especially among adolescents, no, who may already be sexually active. Ito naman, more institutions lang, no, more Popcom working with other institutions, government agencies, even civil society, NGOs, etc. So ito, no, they have, ito kasi parang, ito pala, if you're interested, no, in basic planning, no, and we'll talk about this in module 5, no, project design and development. Usually you have the higher level objectives here on top. Then you have the means. No, how do you get to them? So ito RH, no, responsible parenthood, full implementation of the law, etc., etc. Yung supplies, no, capacitating, engaging civil society. So you have, I won't go through all of this. In your own time, you can read that. Ito naman, no, adolescent interventions, no, advocacies, school and community-based strategies, etc. No? And then integrating population interventions into the different government programs as well. So yun. So there's also a UN agency in charge of this, no, yung UNFPA, United Nations Population Fund, and they've been supporting POPCOM, the Commission on Population, since before. So that's government trust. No? So it really aligns with what we've discussed before. No? It's really all about dependency. No? So you help the poorer ones who are not able to really spend more, no? To really have more manageable family sizes, because you want to address the dependency angle. So that's really the key here. No? When you talk about the population demography, it's all about dependency, burden, and dependency. So, and you want to strongly support families in achieving their desired family size. So, yun. Any questions? Any questions, guys, about anything? All right, so we're done. Oh, none from me po. Yes, all right, great. All right, so thank you for joining. It's a short class, no? So I'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good break next week, no? I'll see you guys. Maraming salamat for joining.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Thank you, sir.